All right, guys, hello and welcome to the Tech Report podcast. We are here, three of us, Jeff Gazer, Jeff Campman, and myself. Jordan Drake, our usual host, has not made it this evening, so we're going to just press on without him. We've got a ton of stuff to discuss, and so we're just going to go ahead and do it. So welcome to everybody who's here. We've got people watching on the live stream and the video. Welcome to you guys. We're going to take questions as we go. And we have a ton of stuff to talk about because last time, guys, I just bailed on this. We had to push it back a week because of we have like this cold going around in my family, and then we had allergies on top of that. And you didn't want to talk to me that night, and I did not want to talk to you. Anyway,
I had allergies, and they turned into bronchitis. It was wonderful.
Oh man, see, that's I rested, and it didn't happen that way, but it could have. So. Anyhow,
gross. I'm feeling a lot better now.
Good, me too. And I think we got tons to talk about, so we can, I guess, just dive right into it. Let's change the order up a little bit. And Jeff, I want to talk about gaming to start, because let's just do that. Project Cars is out. You were following Project Cars, like what was the early release or something?
For years, yeah. It was sort of. I don't even know how old is early access, but it was kind of like the early access model, but not through early access. You had an opportunity to fund the game early on in its development. I think back in 2011, maybe 2012, and you could sort of a Kickstarter type deal that the developer World of Mass Development, I think it's called, just sort of did completely on their own. And you sort of various tiers you could pay to have. You know, I basically got the lowest tier, which is paying a little less than what the full price of the game ended up being. And I think I got, I don't know, bi-weekly builds of the game for several years, which wasn't that great at the beginning. You know, like all the game mechanics were there, but none of the menus worked, and the graphics didn't look right, and there were bugs all the time, and things would crash. But you know, slowly over time. I got to watch the game get more and more polished, and for the last few months, it's actually been in quite a good state. With sort of like menus working and all the graphic stuff looking great, and it's finally out now after several delays. It was supposed to come out, I think, last holiday season, but they pushed it back a couple of times. Yeah, and even in the last month, it sort of got delayed by another couple of weeks as well. But then they finally released it, and it's fantastic. It's definitely the best driving game on the PC if you're looking for sort of a simulation style, maybe not as hardcore as some of the really, really hardcore sims you pay like subscription fees and stuff for. But this definitely has the best mix of sort of the feel of driving combined with just absolutely spectacular graphics. I think it's one of the best looking games out there easily, but by far. So.
Yeah, I was kind of, the PC hasn't had like the Forzas and things like that, right? I know you like that genre of game, and
no, they've had like, sort of the Need for Speed series, and that's been about as much as sort of the big budget games. There are some of these sort of more simulation style games that, like I said, Assetto Corsa and R Factor and a couple of others, but they haven't kind of combined realistic driving dynamics with top flight, as good as it gets graphics that kind of pushes even high-end systems to kind of the brink.
Yeah. See, I don't know. I have to admit, like, I think I might like just super arcadey racing better than the simulation stuff. And some of it is the controls, right? You got like a wheel and pedals. Do you have is it a force feedback wheel?
Oh yeah, and it's
when you have that, you get a different feel. Like the sim thing kind of works. When you're just playing with the game controller, I'm just sliding all over the place. I have no idea what's happening because I'm not getting that feedback or the control, right?
Yeah, it's I find it's pretty good to play with an Xbox 360 controller as well. I play it in my living room all the time on a big screen TV, and I find it's actually a little bit easier to control some of the cars. You can do quick flick movements with a thumbstick that you can't necessarily do as well with a wheel. It doesn't feel as good. It's not as satisfying an experience, and you can't drive the same way you would in kind of an arcade style racer. But they have mapped the controls reasonably well, and you do get force feedback through an Xbox 360 controller. So
okay, yeah,
it does give you a little bit of the feel there. And it's got a whole bunch of force feedback settings you can tweak as well if you want to have sort of more force feedback or less.
I have on I played it just a teeny bit on a test system, and I have on that test system a Shield controller, which is Xbox compatible, but I guess it doesn't have the force feedback.
It may not,
because it was just a limp fish when I was playing. I didn't get anything, so I'm gonna have to hook up a real Xbox controller. Which that's another. I need to have Nathan bring that down, but we don't bring it during the show. Don't. He's watching the stream probably, but yeah, I need to try that out. And you know, it is kind of weird though, because the graphics are great, but when I was playing it, like what you see is like the inside of the car takes up like a third or more of your screen, right? And it's just the inside of a car. It's nothing spectacular. And then you've got like track, and you don't even see much track because it's so like flat out in front of you, and then like some grass, and then like a lot of sky, right? And so it's not spectacular, but then like if you're goofing around or you crash or something and you get to the point where you're outside the car and you're looking at like the shiny automotive finish and the tires and the wheels and all that stuff, like they have a screenshot generator or whatever, then it's like, these are awesome graphics, you know? But when I'm playing it, it's just like, it's not that impressive.
A couple of things you got to try, because I wasn't that impressed with the graphics at first, but my MO was just to kind of just go drive around the track by myself. And then I started doing races and starting at the back of a pack of like 20 cars, so there's always cars in front of me. And that's when you really notice the graphics. Even, you know, when you're going fast too, it has some sort of blurring effects, so stuff on the periphery kind of gets blurred, the track kind of gets blurred a little, but the stuff that's right in front of you, and especially their cars, that's when I get the most, you know, like, oh my god, this looks real moments. And then the other thing that's really good to fiddle around with is the weather and day-night cycle. So you can sort of lock it at a specific time if you want to have just a really good sort of sunset scene or whatever, or actually have as many as 4 weather spots, and, you know, control the pace of time during a race, or just, you know, kind of fooling around on a track. And that's when you start getting some of the really fancy effects. And so some of the water and rain and sort of thunderstorm stuff they've got is really great in terms of graphical, just sort of eye candy, and you know, makes the driving considerably more difficult, but it's worth it just for the way it looks.
Cool. Well, I've got it, and I'm gonna use it as a test, as a benchmark for graphics chips, so we can sort of see which GPUs are better and all that. And I guess there's been some controversy around that. Jeff Campman, you wrote a little bit about this, right?
Yeah, we scratched the surface of what's going on with it, kind of. Like a couple, like Project Cars and I guess The Witcher 3 are not playing well with AMD graphics hardware for whatever reason. And the circumstances behind each situation are a little different. I think with Project Cars, what's happened is that the developer has gone so far as to come out and say, you know, we provided test keys to AMD. They haven't talked to us since last October. And so we just went ahead and released the game without, you know, too much optimization for their drivers or hardware, I think was the gist of it. And so it's not running too well. I haven't been able to find like any specific complaints. I guess like just FPS is low in general. But so there's that, and then with The Witcher 3, the developer behind that implemented some NVIDIA proprietary technologies like Hairworks, which is like simulated hair, I guess, using tessellation. And it's apparently a real performance hog on even NVIDIA hardware, but it puts AMD cards into the tank as well, because, you know, they're not optimized for it. And so what this has led AMD to do is they've said, you know, we're going to release another set of Catalyst beta drivers in the version 15.5 beta. They're apparently going to make some improvements to make The Witcher 3 run better. They're going to try and make some improvements to make Project Cars run better. So maybe some of that optimization work is getting done now.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. You know, these graphics companies kind of like push little stories about like bad things about one another back and forth. So like, you know, the game comes out with the GameWorks effect in it, like this Hairworks thing, and AMD says, oh, GameWorks is a black box and you can't optimize it, and they have all these criticisms of it. And you know, the developers are kind of caught in the middle, and then at the same time, then like NVIDIA goes and like throws shade on what was the latest maybe NVIDIA inspired story about AMD hasn't released a new WCL certified graphics driver in like 160 days or something. And so there's this back and forth about all of this. I don't know what to say other than that personally the way I feel about it is this. Like, if you're AMD and new games keep coming out and they don't run well on your hardware, and your competitor, like even with Gaming Evolved games and all the things that are sponsored by AMD, if your competitor can make those games run well, like, you have a problem. You need to fix that. You need to make them work right. And like, Jeff, you had Project Cars for how long?
Oh, months. I mean, years, really.
Yeah, I think they probably could have too. I mean, come on, right? They sold enough Radeons to buy a copy or an early access, if nothing else, right?
This has not been an under-the-radar game either.
Right.
I mean,
it's a major release that has been, in development for a long time. So if it comes out and gets official release and doesn't run well on AMD, to some extent, that's AMD's own fault, right? They should have done something there, and I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't like that. You were gonna say
NVIDIA. I mean, it's just like, well, it was even weirder because like and this is of course why you should never trust random Reddit posts, but one Reddit person just posted this whole thing and said, the Project Cars developer deliberately chose to use PhysX because it will tank AMD graphics card performance. And the company basically came out and said, no.
Right.
It's just, it's an AMD driver issue, which it's just really. But that was really scandalous. I think that post got like all the upvotes, and they had to come out and officially deny it. So
yeah.
But in general, I think like they said. Or I forget who said it. I think it was the Project Cars people, but NVIDIA works with them, but they don't sponsor it. They don't make them include things. It's not like NVIDIA is deliberately ruining AMD hardware. I think it's just making the experience better for GeForce owners. Which if they can afford to do that, great.
Yeah, even if NVIDIA is like sabotaging AMD's stuff, like somehow they've managed to not feel the consequences of it the other direction. And, I'm not saying I really don't like the idea of these graphics card makers not allowing the PC to be an open platform where games have a chance to run well on either brand of graphics card or whatever brand of graphics card.
I mean, it's not,
but
just like
there is a history here, right? Of like the last few years, there've been too many games that come out that don't run well on Radeons.
Right.
That's my thought. I mean, that's the thing that gets me is if it's 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, it's one thing, But it's this long pattern, and like every Ubisoft game, every Assassin's Creed title ever, like at some point, that's that's got to be your fault, AMD, because your Radeon platform fails to perform, and like that really stinks. And I don't know.
Right.
Anyway. Jeff, what do you say?
It's just hilarious how like escalated it's gotten.
Yeah.
But
it's a tough time, right? It's a tough time for AMD. NVIDIA knows it, and they're pushing their stuff, and they're executing pretty well as far as I can tell on their stuff. And I don't know. It is a weird time. At the same time, it's like everything that AMD has contributed to the world that's open and championed, like they did Mantle, and that got spun into Vulkan and became the impetus for DirectX 12, and like a lot of things that they've done that are open are now like the foundations for what everybody's going to build on from here.
I mean, that's incredible, but
it is. Yet they're still selling rebranded GPUs from like late 2011 or something. So,
We're also not addressing like a major pain point. It's always been with the PC. Like a new game comes out, like, do I need to patch it? What drivers do I need to be doing? What do I need to update in my system? And NVIDIA at least seems to have sorted out the fact that when new games come out, people just want to play them without having to fuss about stuff. They've got, GeForce Experience, which will have profiles. It'll do automatic kind of settings optimization to go along with the drivers. It'll tell you to download automatically. It just seems to be a much more polished kind of end user experience for someone who wants to play games, as opposed to, like waiting for a beta driver to come out or something like that.
Yeah, that auto driver delivery thing. Hey, we knew it needed to happen a long time ago, because every time a game came out, it was like, I gotta do this, and a lot of people don't. And now that one side has and the other one kind of doesn't really, they had that Raptor thing that I doesn't work as well and isn't made by AMD.
It's crowdsourced,
right?
So it's not
but
as
I mean,
effective with a new game because no one has the game yet, right? So.
But it's not how I would update my Radeon drivers. It's not that great, so I don't know. I guess I need to play with it more. But the GeForce Experience thing is pretty slick. It just works. So.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, that's sad. Let's move on.
Sure.
Let's move to the next topic. I do want to talk about this because this is kind of fun. Jeff Campman, you wrote this up. The Moorfield-powered ZenFone 2 is available for $199 unlocked. This is from Asus.
Correct.
And that's cheap, right, for what looks like a full-feature smartphone.
Yeah, it's a pretty spectacular value. It's a 5.5-inch 1080p phone. It's got a 13-megapixel camera. The base configuration comes with 16 gigabytes of storage and 2 gigabytes of RAM, and an Intel Atom Z3560 processor. That's pretty good. But what's really interesting about this phone is for $100 more, you get a Atom Z3580, which is the same CPU that was in the Dell Venue 8 7000. You get double the RAM. It has 4 gigabytes and 64 gigabytes of storage. And that's pretty incredible.
Oh,
so it's $299 unlocked, right?
So it's $300 for the one that has 4 gigs and the faster CPU,
right?
Wait, which must be this one that I'm holding up right here. Anyway, you just totally, like, I was illustrating as you're speaking, but
yeah.
I did stop by the launch event for this in New York City and picked one up,
cool.
and I'm going to be looking at it, but I wanted to spend some actual quality time with it before we go any further. But it looks really nice, right? And this is a big deal for Intel because it's a nice, like, feature phone. Jeff, I think this is probably better than the OnePlus One.
I've been looking. Well, it has a couple of things that the OnePlus One doesn't have. It has the micro SD slot, which is kind of a big deal, and that's the biggest one for me.
Yeah.
It has more RAM. I'm not sure if that's going to make much of a difference, but it's also cheaper. It's the $300. I think it's $350 for the 64 gig OnePlus One.
Yeah,
and the entry level model is actually quite a bit cheaper. I think it's $300 for the OnePlus One, and this is sort of $100 cheaper for slightly less RAM and not the high end CPU, but for a completely unlocked phone with a 1080p screen. I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Well, and this is a big deal for Intel because they have, interestingly, they've kind of made inroads into the Android phone and tablet markets. They did that, like the Dell Venue 8 that you reviewed, Jeff, really is one of the better Android tablets that you could buy. And the Android tablets have not been in a great place, but the Venue 8 is among the best right now. And now Asus comes in with this, and it's not necessarily, like, they're still higher end, like the Samsung stuff, but amongst that sort of second tier of phones, this looks pretty attractive and is kind of a big deal for Intel. It's also a big deal for Asus, who made the Nexus 7, which was a big hit. They've done the Transformers, which have been nice, and they've done phones in other markets, and just did like 1 or 2 earlier leaked ones into like 1 or 2 small carriers or something. But this is T-Mobile and AT&T, and it's a broader release, I think, coming into the North American market. So, or at least U.S. I don't know about Canada. Do you?
I haven't heard anything.
Okay. Anyway, so it's kind of a big deal just from that standpoint. So I'm curious about it's got 4 gigs of RAM, but it's going to emulate ARM on the x86 processor in here. So there's going to be some memory overhead there. So how is this compared to like an x86 native 3 gig like a OnePlus One? But Jeff, I got to say, having used it just a little bit, just doing basic stuff, it's really freaking fast and smooth. Like it really feels good. So
well, the Dell tablet is great in terms of usability, and it's pushing an even higher resolution screen. So
yeah, and you know that's important. I'm not sure that they're going to win all the benchmarks, but they seem to have gotten the usability stuff right, and honestly, that's what matters more, right?
well, and they've gotten the pricing and the fact that they're making it available unlocked with stuff that at least I want. Like I want a micro SD slot. It makes the base model really attractive, especially at $200. What I'm really curious about is the UI. How much like stock Android is it, and how much of the stuff that they've changed is better or at least neutral as opposed to like TouchWiz?
It's not as bad as TouchWiz. It's not as chunky, slow, like and all that. There are some things that aren't great. I don't know if you can see, but it's instead of rounded corners, they're squared off because they had to do that. I don't know, but it's if you're used to Lollipop, this is Lollipop skinned, and it has more junk when you pull down the settings menu. I'm trying to get this out of my light here. Like more icons right there. This is not the whole settings page. It's just that second menu where you slide down more, and there's like more junk. It's not hard to use or navigate so far, and the look is pretty consistent. It's not totally ugly. You know how it is. I'd rather be running Lollipop straight than this, but there are a few things that they did that you want because they're extra features, right?
The other interesting thing too about this is, I don't think we covered it, is that they said that they will be releasing a way to unlock the bootloader for people who want to install other things, so that could also be attractive if you want to play with it.
Yeah, could be.
So
I have to say I've got several Lollipop-based devices, and this is the smoothest running one by far. The really Lollipop experience hasn't been great on a lot of things, but this one it's well integrated and seems to be quite good. So I'm pleased with that. The other thing that I'm not so sure about is so here's the biggest downside is the lock unlock button is on the top up here along the top edge, and it's kind of they kind of did the LG G3 G4 type thing where the buttons on the back here for volume up down, and then this is lock, and this lock button is small. It's kind of hard to actuate, and it's not got a lot of positive feedback on it. It is clear, like Steve Jobs would have someone's head for that, right? I mean, it's one of those things where you look at it, you go, okay, rookie mistake, right? And it's surprising to me because Asus makes really good stuff, right? They didn't make some of those mistakes, but like they were in the Nexus program with the Nexus 7, right? And the volume control, it just bugs me. I don't want to press on the touchscreen, but I kind of have to change the volume because it's hard to get leverage to. So I don't know about that button placement.
Does it at least have tap to wake for the screen?
Yes. Yeah, it just did it for me as after you asked. So that's good. And in fact, I probably would just wind up using that because the top button stinks.
I never used the button, but it would annoy me having it on top. They do a weird thing on one of their 7-inch tablets too. I think they put the power button on the opposite side that it usually is. I don't know. They want to have their own conventions or.
Keep them guessing, man.
Just agreed on stuff like that,
Right. No, I mean innovation. It's like a keyboard, right? You're gonna innovate in keyboards. Don't do it with your key layout, idiot.
or at least explain to me why this is better. Like I can't imagine any scenario where having the button on the very top is a desirable thing.
Yeah, it's hard. It's a little awkward, and so I don't know. It's nice though. It's a little thick, but it's curved to the edges, so it's not bad.
It's all plastic, right?
There's no metal. It's kind of a brushed metal looking plastic, and then with the review unit, I got a case that has this pops off, the back pops off, and then the case pops on, and it has a flip cover.
Interesting.
So it doesn't get any thicker when you put that case on because it's a custom back. So that's pretty good. With that cover on, it's still like thicker than the iPhone 6 Plus with the leather Apple case, but it's not that much thicker. And I don't know. It's super cheap compared to like you have a lot of these for the price of a 6 Plus, and 6 Plus has 1 gig of RAM, which is the worst thing about it actually is the amount of RAM. So it's there aren't many things bad about a 6 Plus, and honestly, the display on this Asus it's got to be IPS. I haven't even looked at the spec, but it is not in the class with the latest Apple and Samsung stuff at all. Where those two guys are really going at it loggerheads about the best possible display, and the OLEDs from Samsung are like gorgeous to make you melt, and then the Apple stuff is like rock solid at off viewing angles and super high contrast. This is neither of those, so it's not as good. It's still a really good IPS display, but the big dogs have taken it to another level, and this, cheaper, but you're not getting that.
Right.
Yeah. So
Is the battery removable because you can take the back off?
I don't know. I haven't taken the back off. If you want me to turn it off, I could do some surgery here. And
I don't think you think you can get the back off, but I don't think the battery itself is removable. Because as this fast charging tech, I think that's how companies are making up for this now, where you can just plug it in for 40 minutes or something, and it gets to like 60% of a charge.
Okay.
The fancy version comes with a special charger for that by default, but then you have to pay $30 to get that with the base model, which, then you're already most of the way to the fancier version.
I'm not getting the back off while we're talking, guys. It's not going to happen. So I'll check it out. Let you know, Jeff, but I haven't done that yet. I need to, I guess, if I want to put the flip case on it, but I don't want to put the flip case on it, except for that if I drop it, then I'll wish I put the flip case on it. So I don't know. Anyway, that's that. I guess we should move to our next agenda item, unless you guys have other things you want to discuss about that thing. I'm going to try to do a full review, but it may have to be a quick review because there's a ton of stuff coming. Computex is coming, and this is a busy time of the year. So, but let's talk about this. Jeff Kampmann, you reviewed the Fractal Design Define R5 for us.
Yes.
And it's one of your favorites. And now they've done what I think they should have done at the beginning, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, so the Define R5, like Fractal Designs, like trademark design language throughout all of its cases, is to have these like contrasting white fans and PCI expansion slot covers. And I guess it looks fine to me. I don't notice it most of the time when it's under a desk. But they took a Define R5 and they painted all of those expansion covers black and all the hard drive cages black, and they made the fans black plastic, and it's called the Define R5 Blackout Edition. So if you don't like the white, you now have a way to get one without it.
And they're charging more. So
yeah,
it's like what, $10 more or something?
Yeah, it's $10 more. Oh, I guess the windowed version, it gets this fancy smoked plastic side window as well. So that to me would be kind of neat, but
yeah,
it's
like
mostly
that.
A cosmetic change. So
Yeah.
it's already an excellent case. So if it tickles your fancy, hey, $10 more.
And $10 more is 119 for no window, 129 for the window.
Right.
And this is kind of like when I wrote up. I built my system in this Cooler Master Silencio 652S. Like, it's a $119 case, so it competes directly with this. This class of cases, don't spend more unless you're building some ridiculously huge system, because these are really, really good. And this part of the market has gotten super competitive because these are also super, super quiet at the same time.
Right. Well, as we'll soon see with this upcoming, I have another Fractal case in my office for review right now, but as we'll soon see, there's certainly no reason to spend more than this. You might get nicer stuff, like Antex P380 has got that 1/8 of an inch solid aluminum plate all around it, but as far as usability goes and noise levels go, I think Fractal, I guess Cooler Master, I haven't used the Silencio, but
well, Corsair has a case too.
Corsair. Well, I don't want to badmouth Corsair. I think the Obsidian 450D is a great case. I just think that case is getting a little long in the tooth compared to the newest stuff, because it doesn't have any of those noise reduction features, and it's it's less modular, I think.
Right.
So, I would expect Corsair probably to come out with a new version of that midline case here sometime soon, because I think like the competition is just too hot to sit back. But
Yeah.
that's
And-
pure speculation. So
Yeah, I have a hard time with this too, because like I had the Silencio 652S. I built the system and it was great. They're clear, like there's not enough room behind the motherboard tray for lots of cables to cross, and they should have given it. It should have been a little wider. There are clear things that you could say. Well, that's about it, really. But like, it's not the best. But honestly, like, it's so good that when you're reviewing these things now, you have to be like, it's a weird
Yeah.
place to be in, right? Because
you gotta be picky.
They're not right. They're not bad
Yeah, it's
choices.
not- right, they're not bad.
And you have to realize at some point you are being picky, because
Yeah.
like, wow, like that's the not best one, because
right.
good Lord, I mean, that's so much better than what I
and
got
think
3 years
it's
ago.
it's weird because, well, I mean, there are still some, like, the fractal cases have some usability enhancements that are really nice. Like, you see them and you think, why didn't somebody else do that? Like, the radiator mounts are offset from the motherboard a whole bunch. And it's really easy to, they've got these Fractal, I think another Fantex also includes these, but they've got Velcro straps behind the motherboard tray for easy cable routing. It's like, why haven't other companies done this before? It's just so obvious, and it makes building so easy. So I think, like, as far as, maybe in terms of cooling performance and noise performance, unless you're buying a really cheap, awful case, I think they're pretty close now. But I think for usability, that's still a place where people can distinguish themselves.
Yeah.
Companies can distinguish themselves.
And the usability is so much higher than it used to be.
Right.
Because, see, when I was starting doing this, it was you just bled a lot.
Yeah.
And because everything was, like, super hard, like, sharp edges, jagged edges that were... And no one cared about you. It was just cheap stamp metal, terrible stuff. And now it's... Anyway, it's good to be a PC enthusiast these days. So
It's really nice. I've enjoyed, like, none of the cases I've reviewed, I think, are really just flat out bad. Like you said, they're just, they're varying levels of good. So
that's the way barbecue is in Kansas City, by the way. There's bad barbecue other places. It will not survive here. So anyway, I digress. Okay, so Jeff Gazer, you wrote this one up. Sorry, did I interrupt?
Oh, no, you're good.
Okay. This is a dual Xeon board that supports what? I guess it makes sense, right? Multi-GPU configs?
Yeah, this is for, if you look at the X99 platform and Haswell and think, that's just not enough CPU cores for me, not enough PCI Express lanes, not enough RAM slots, this is what you get.
And this is Gigabyte's MW70-3S0, which is a sexy
Worst
name.
motherboard name ever. But you've got dual LGA 2011 V3 sockets, so those will work with the Xeon E5 2600 V3. I don't know, Xeon model numbers are almost as bad as the motherboard name.
Yeah,
But it's basically the latest Haswell EP Xeons.
Yeah, V3 is the Haswell. Yeah.
You got 16 DIMM slots, so it can take 512 gigs of RAM. You've got 3 full-size PCI Express X16 slots. You can't actually do 4-way SLI or Crossfire in this, but you can do 3-way, and it's also got some by-8 slots. It's got a whole bunch of SATA ports from sort of the workstation version of the X99 chipset, plus it's got a separate SAS controller on board. It's just a completely overbuilt workstation board that, they very explicitly have Crossfire and SLI's certification for this. So if you want to, do some heavy lifting but also play games with multiple graphics cards, this is a good candidate for it.
Dude, it only supports 3-way.
I know.
It doesn't do 4. I'm really disappointed. I got my ½ terabyte of RAM.
Well, the funny thing is, you've got Z97 boards that only have 16 total lanes of PCI Express from the CPU, and you got some of those that support 4-way SLI and Crossfire, and this has, up to 40 per CPU, so 80 lanes total.
And it doesn't have the slots. I mean,
I don't think it has
say?
the space. Like if you look at the board, I don't think they could fit like sort of a 7th and 8th slot there while keeping all the RAM slots. I don't think there's enough sort of vertical area there.
That just make it like whatever the thing after EATX is, WTX or whatever. Like there's another number of letters for. That's like the worst thing. You remember like, you had ATX and then they started at EATX, WATX or WTX or what they DTX. I mean ITX.
There's some unofficial. There's ATX XL as well. It's like slightly taller to account for these 4-way boards.
There you go, and it's just like display resolutions. So it's like we had. VGA and CGA and then XGA and WXGA and WQXGA and all. Like they still do that now, and like almost 4K almost fits in that, but they're terrible. I can't retain those. I have no idea when you tell me it's WQXGA what it is. I'm just mad at you for not telling me the resolution, which is way simpler than whatever your acronym is for a resolution.
Quad Ultra Extended Graphics Array.
Yeah, no.
Just rolls right off the tongue.
No.
I think 4K is the worst because it can be any one of a series of resolutions too. Like it's not like 1080p or something where like, okay, I know what that is.
Right. Well, the
4K is just kind of like, well, it's probably this, but it could be something else.
The best thing about 4K is that it's a lie in 2 dimensions. Because first of all, like all the other resolutions, 720, 1080, and then they go to 4K. It's like, oh, 4 versus 10, but it's actually let's just switch to counting the other direction, and instead of up and down pixels we'll count across because then we get more, and then it's a lie because generally speaking the resolution is not actually 4000 all the way across.
Right.
It's like 3840 is the most common one, and so it's like,
but it can be 4096.
It can,
depending on who you talk to.
And
it's just really weird.
Right, they probably made like 5 of those screens just so they could say it was 4K, and then all the rest of them are 3840. And I don't know. It's just terrible. So whatever. We know what if you use one, you know what it is. But anyway, okay. Let's move to the next topic. What is the next topic, guys? We've totally messed with the with our agenda.
Yeah.
Right, let's do this one.
So we talked about Catalyst.
Let's talk about. What happened to me briefly, which is I've chronicled how I'm getting Google Fiber. They came out and they dug in my yard. Look at this. They dug in my yard and they put fiber in the ground, and it was like, this is Google Fiber.
Isn't it so awful just knowing that it's right there?
It was like that was a while ago that they did that, and they've gone all through the city. We were like the last people. They had dug everywhere, and you saw them put in the interduct, and you saw them pull the stuff through the interduct, and they get the fiber in the ground, and they're like, sign up now. And I signed up like months ago, and then they're like, encourage your neighbors to sign up. We'll start installations in May. And I people went out and like knocked and hung things on the mailbox. We have a common mailbox thing for several houses here, and they're like, sign up for this, and our fiberhood qualified for Google Fiber. And then they like, after it was like, congratulations, you've qualified. We're like, yeah, we made the deadline. And then a little bit later they send this thing out, and they're like, and it was like a form letter. It was like, our records show that you are currently due to be installed in winter. I was like, winter? It's friggin' May!
Yeah.
And so who knows when we'll actually have Google Fiber here. And I don't know what the holdup is, because they've really have already run all the cable everywhere. But because we have AT&T Uverse here in our neighborhood, we have Time Warner Cable, and now we have Google Fiber. AT&T has said in parts of the metro they're rolling out a fiber competitive product. And now Time Warner has done they've done several speed upgrades since Google Fiber got into the metro, where it was like you get an email and your speed is up for the same price. So the different tiers all get pushed up in speed. But this latest one is what they call a max upgrade. And so, for instance, ours, we had a 50 megabit down, 5 megabit up service, which was second from the fastest that you could get. And they upgraded it to 200 megabits down and 20 megabits upstream. So 4 times the speed, both up and down. And so I told the story of this in a little blog post. The weirdest thing about it was that they They sent us thing in snail mail saying, here you go. And I went and tried it. It was about half what they said the speed I was supposed to get was. And they said, you may need a new modem. So I went online and ordered a new modem. A couple days passed, and they shut down our service completely. And so I went on Twitter, and I was like, contacted their help people on Twitter who seem to be pretty active, and said, is there an outage in my area? What's going on? Because clearly, like, it's not my thing. It's something's going on with your service. And they said, oh, your modem has been quarantined to inform you that you need to get a new modem to get the full speeds. And I'm like, but you took my service completely down. Like, how is that okay? You know? And they said that some routers will block a little web message you're supposed to get that will let you, like, go and order the modem and then turn off the quarantine. So I don't know, but we got that sorted out and got the service working again. And yesterday the modem came, and I installed it, and now I've got the speed test results here, over 200 megabits downstream and over 20 megabits upstream over cable.
Man.
And so the question now becomes, like, for uploading, gigabit Ethernet or gigabit fiber, is better, right? And if you've got gigabit fiber, then they can upgrade it to 2 or more because it's friggin' optical fiber, so it's going to be, like, it's got more headroom in it. But if you have 200 plus megabits of downstream, if you're not worried about, like, uploading to YouTube or doing specific things that require a lot of upstream, like most of what you do, how many consumer services and servers out there really sling bits to the consumer at over 200 megabits? And all I know of is Steam. And Steam is always the fastest for anything. And so I tried it, and I got 25 megabytes per second downloading, which is basically full speed that this thing is capable of. But I can tell you what, it isn't going to be Intel's driver download that's going to max this out. And there aren't that many things that I don't think that hit that speed. So are there things that you guys use that, like, press against your upstream speed clearly? And what? How fast are your connections?
Oh man, I don't know, like 15.1.
Okay, well, you don't even count. Don't talk to me about it. Jeff,
I'm in the same ballpark. They were supposed to upgrade my area to be able to do 50, but it's not happening yet. So yeah, I'm at like 15 down, and Steam consistently maxes it out, but that's really the only thing.
Okay, well, I'm gonna explore a little more, but my sense is, I don't know. There's some things that I would say are good that I don't feel like I even need this upstream. For instance, streaming Netflix videos, which we do constantly. That's the number one way we watch TV. Has been fine since we had 15 megabits back before Time Warner decided that it needed to compete and gave us multiple upgrades that got us to 200 for the same price. But that was it was fast enough the whole time, right? I think now with 4K video and some things you may need more bandwidth, but it's never been a problem.
I can always use more upload. Like I'm slinging like 80 megabyte images up to Flickr. I could always use more upload speed.
Well, you got one megabit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course you could. Use your cell phone. It's faster. Like your cell phone's probably 5 at least.
It probably is.
LTE. Yeah. You need to tether when you have to upload.
We have Uverse here, and that tops out about 45 if you buy the most expensive package, and we could switch over to Comcast, but just the thought of that makes me ill.
Yeah, I'm pleased that Time Warner is doing this, and I'm also pleased that they're not merging with Comcast, who has a terrible reputation. So, anyway. Well, I'm going to play with this a little more and sort of get a feel for this, but I tell you what, this makes it a lot easier to wait for Google Fiber to come into town. And for some things, like my parents have Time Warner, I don't know that they need to bother upgrading to Google Fiber, given this, right? They don't even need the 200 megabit down, but I think they have like 50 down, 5 up now, for a pretty reasonable price. And like they don't want to change their TV service because they want like some old people channels that like you can't get on Google Fiber because Google, of course, wouldn't get the old people channels in its package. So I don't think they're going to change. This like saves them from, I don't have to go through. I was going to like change them to Google Fiber and help them with that. I don't have to do that now. So I don't know. All right, so let's move to our next subject here, which is Jeff Gager. You wrote this up. This is an OCZ drive that is NVMe, which is
Yes.
fancy. So explain what this has. Multiple new interface and protocol things, right?
Well, they're not really new so much as just this is kind of the next generation of PCI Express drives. So for a while, PCI Express drives were available, but they use this old AHCI protocol that's been around since SATA drives first came out. So that's fine for mechanical storage, but it's not really built to scale up with the kind of performance that modern SSDs can offer. So the replacement for AHCI is NVM Express, otherwise known as NVMe, and it was designed specifically for SSDs. It's super scalable. It's designed to sort of last for years. And modern SSDs are actually just kind of scratching the surface of what it can do. So this drive is it's a PCI Express drive. It has 4 lanes of Gen 3 bandwidth. It's got a PMC Sierra controller. So this is not an in-house design from OZZ. This is very much an enterprise-oriented controller. The controller actually has 16 NAND channels, which is double what you find in a typical SSD controller. Has one of these FF8639 interfaces, which is basically like a cabled PCI Express interface. So the drive itself is actually a 2.5-inch drive. It's 15 millimeters thick, which is sort of the thickness of what some of the enterprise class mini SSDs are. Intel 750 series, their sort of desktop version of their data center drive is the same form factor. And it's, this is OCZ's, I guess, kind of answer to the data center equivalent of Intel's 750 series. So there are a couple of different flavors of it. There's a Z6000 series, which is made for sort of read-intensive workloads. It has a lower endurance rating than the Z6300 series, which is made for kind of mixed read and write environments. Right now the drives go up to 3.2 terabytes. There's also a version they're coming out with that's going to be 6.4 terabytes, although that's not available yet. And they're also working on kind of an add-in card version, so it'll be kind of like a half-height PCI Express card. That's also coming later as well. So yeah, it's a high-end server and workstation drive. One of the neater things about this is it actually has a configurable thermal envelope, so you can set the drive to perform at 15 watts, 20 watts, or 25 watts, depending on what kind of enclosure you put it in. So if you're using it in a really densely packed server, you might want to dial it back a little bit, and you maybe give up a little bit of performance to keep temperatures down. This also has sort of thermal throttling built in, so it won't actually overheat. It'll just scale back performance if temperatures get too high. So it's an interesting looking drive. The performance figures are appropriately ridiculous. You can go 2,900 megabits or megabytes per second for sequential reads, almost 2,000 for sequential writes. The interesting thing is they're claiming over 700,000 random read IOPS, which is higher than we've seen for sort of the equivalent Intel drives, although the random write rate isn't quite as good. So this does seem to be something that will perform better in more of a read-intensive environment. So
a comment from the chat, Alpha Cheese says, "I'm looking forward to a review showing this not doing that much better than a BX100 in a desktop workload."
That's probably what's going to happen with something like this, yeah.
We know these are faster. Literally faster hard or SSDs exist than what you could buy, and like you can measure them, and they will transfer data faster. They're better at randomized access. They're not necessarily faster in access latencies, but access latencies are like extremely
they
small.
are kind of faster in the sense that they can deliver the really fast access latencies for longer, and maybe you're talking about like a microsecond or two faster than
right. But if you're sitting there using a system with this in it, it is not going to blow your hair back any more than a pretty good mid-range SSD that you plug into a SATA port, because the software that controls all this is kind of doesn't take advantage. And games and things like that are not written to be like, well, we'll just stream in this data now. We don't need to load another level. They may be at some point in the future, and then you want the faster drive. But that future is a long way off, isn't it? It seems like it.
Well, and there's also this kind of problem where, a game developer is going to target the lowest common denominator. So in the same way that games are kind of bound by what a large segment of the market has. And for a while, it used to be, game developers would have to make a game run at least possible to run the game on Intel integrated graphics. Even if you assume people have SSDs, you're probably assuming that they're going to have a SATA drive, which in terms of sequential speeds is going to be much, like a quarter or less the speed of something like this. So I think we'll get to a point, hopefully not too long from now, where developers start making assumptions about there being an SSD present in the system, and maybe there being either access or the ability to read sequentially much faster, or to have that benefit in random access times. But the jump then, or the gap between a SATA drive and a PCI Express drive is fairly large, and I think you're going to have a situation where so much of the market is on SATA SSDs that to sort of take advantage of those will be one step, and then to move beyond those and to actually see a tangible benefit from something that's PCI Express, we may have to wait even longer.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. It would be nice. It'd be nice if we find some things that, like, okay, this is clearly better, and they're just aren't
4K video editing. That's
there
the
you
answer
go.
for everything. I mean, and if you're working with really large files, like if you're in content creation work or dealing with big media files, the fact that you can read data more quickly or transfer files more quickly does have benefits. It's just not kind of that jump from mechanical drives to solid state drives, and it's not something that kind of your average desktop user is going to notice, like they will moving from a mechanical drive to an SSD.
I saw an interesting thing that was just a link on Twitter the other day that Coding Horror, who was Jeff Atwood, who was on the show some time ago, linked to, and it was just a guy who was doing some type of like graph sorting or some crazy algorithm, and it's a hard computing problem. And what he was doing was, instead of like bringing stuff into memory and working on it and then putting it back out or whatever, I think it's because of big data sets, he was just accessing the SSDs to do this work, and was able to be way faster than prior methods, just being able to assume storage is super fast and really large, we'll just do this. And I think treating solid state storage like what it is, which is a slightly slower form of memory that's near to the system, instead of something that's kind of this alien super slow spinning platter thing, is where you get those advantages in performance in the future. And they'll come, but it may take some re-architecting of file systems and software in a pretty fundamental way. So, all right, let's talk about something that's more easier to understand. Jeff Kampman, there's a really thin TV, and there's an attractive Asian lady showing it to us
Yes.
in this story. So this
Okay,
is LG?
so- Yes, LG Display made I guess it's a prototype, and what this is they've made an OLED, or optical light emitting diode, or not optical, organic light emitting diode.
I assume
TV
it's optical too.
Yeah, it's yeah. I'm punching myself in the face for the obvious part, but so it's only like 3/100ths of an inch thick. It's less than a millimeter thick, and is a 55-inch TV, and it only weighs like 4.2 pounds. And it's so thin, like there's so little to it that they have to include a separate magnetic mat to stick it to a wall. So the demonstrator, she, like, you can see in the very upper right corner where, there's just this little thin sliver of TV, and then everything else is just the mat. But, so they aren't actually making this thing yet. Like I said, it's a prototype, but, they're trying to, I guess, drum up interest in, like, their OLED manufacturing. I guess they say yields are improving for OLED. I guess that's been a problem in the past. And they say it improved over 80% in a really short time. Like, it took 1.5 years to get to this point, as opposed to 10 years for LCDs. And so I'm for it. I mean, OLED is like, the biggest advantage of it is, like, when you have blacks, they don't. LCDs, they use a backlight of some kind that's always on, because they have to illuminate the whole panel, where, like, an OLED pixel illuminates itself, so when it's not, like, showing something, it's just off, so blacks are really black, and I think that it's great. I hope they ramp it up more. I hope that it makes its way into more products. But it's still not common yet. It's still, I think, really expensive. I haven't gone and looked at the price of.
Yeah, well, this in particular is just a proof of concept. So,
right.
The big OLED TVs are not cost effective yet.
No.
But I think that the hope is that, like, as they ramp up manufacturing and hopefully get more volume, the price comes down.
Yeah,
over time.
they'll hopefully they achieve some economies of scale. But
right. So we're a long way from that, but that does look cool, and it looks like that you could probably almost make a curved display out of that thing.
Yeah,
just by sticking it on a curved mat.
Yeah, it looks flexible.
Yeah,
I mean, it probably is flexible. So,
Jeff Gazier, were you the one who sent that link to that curved triple display thing? Where is that, man? Can you find that?
I can give me a minute. I can find it. Yeah.
So that's one of the things that OLEDs make very feasible is that the displays can be curved, because it's a printing process almost like an inkjet, I think, to make an OLED, and so you can put it on a flexible substrate and then build the display that way. And I didn't care about I thought these curved displays were like silly until I saw this thing that Jeff sent the other day. So if you can't find it, I'm going to pull up another one that doesn't look as good that I've got a picture of here.
Yeah, maybe I'll just pull it from the chat window. Here we go.
Anyway, it was a racing setup. It looked like they had pedals and a wheel and stuff, and they had some pretty good sized triple monitors, curved monitors, and they had done a triple setup with them. So it was basically like this hemispherical, array of displays. Let's see. Oh, he's put it in the chat over here. So I'll see if I can get it into the appropriate window for the show. And I barely can. Let's move this down. I can't do it. I can't put it in the right window for the show. It's got this like whole issue with this.
It's too many monitors. Too much widescreen glory.
Anyway,
yeah, that's insane.
It's so beautiful. We must have it. But I don't think I can show it to you guys because the XSplit overlay fails me here, so I apologize. Anyway, now I want 3, not just 1 but 3 curved displays, or big ones right in my face. So I'm suddenly that one array like that you set up will convince you that you want something you didn't think you did when it was just a single one. But there you go. All right, let's move on to let's talk about this thing. Which is hilarious in its way. MediaTek announced this. This is a little bit of an older story, but MediaTek announced this thing called the Helio X20, Helio Castroneves X20, and Jeff, this is a mobile SoC, right? But what's its gimmick? Because it's got one.
So MediaTek is the low cost smartphone SoC provider, or just smartphones, tablets. So they're one of these integrators we talk about when we talk about ARM and Power VR or Imagination Technologies or whatever. They take their IP and make chips of them. But so MediaTek, they took this X20, it takes 10 ARM cores.
ARM, dude. Call them
ARM. Sorry.
That's good.
ARM cores and packs them onto this system on the chip. And that's its gimmick. It has 10 cores.
Yeah.
And it looks really good in marketing copy. But, they actually, I don't know. This is kind of interesting. But what they've done is, so they have 2 Cortex A72 cores, which is the new ARM architecture, I believe, that we just talked about recently.
Yes.
And then they have 8 more A53s, and 4 of those run at 2 gigahertz, and 4 run at 1.4 gigahertz. And they have this proprietary scheduler that's supposed to allow devices to match computing resources to the demands of applications better, using those 3 clusters or pools of CPU resources. So
yeah, yeah. So we have
we talked about yeah. It's more, it's crazy. It's silly.
It is, and yet there's at least a little bit of sense in this.
Right. And we were talking, and this does ARM A53 cores. We talked about this when this came out, and I think they can scale their clocks. But to get that, because the question, some might have is, why are they not scaling it from 2 gigahertz down to 1.4, with just 4 more cores or whatever as needed. And I think we talked about that, and the conclusion was that it would require a lot of just clock scaling logic on the chip itself, and it might actually have just been easier to throw all these cores on the chip running at these clock speeds.
Well, it's not that hard to change your dynamic voltage or frequency scaling and change your clock speeds, and ARM cores do run at different speeds and step up and down under control of usually sometimes it's an on-chip controller, sometimes it's an off-chip PMIC, power management IC.
Sure.
But it is true that if you look at say an Intel big core CPU, they have their own microcontroller or small processor on board for power management logic. And I think it was back in the Nehalem era when Intel was really starting to build the foundation of what they do even to this day, that they said that they had a larger than a 486 power controller on their chip. And that's big. And you look at some of these little Cortex A53 clusters that they put on these SoCs, they're not that big. And so I think there's a trade-off between, what you do with your die space in terms of having lots of control logic and what you could do with your die space by just putting disparate types of computing resources on the die and switching around. The one thing I was going to say that makes sense here is that they have 2 A72s instead of 4. Because you really, for power efficiency's sake, those little cores are not having more of them is not a big deal because none of them take very much power at all. But those big cores like the A72 are kind of a big deal. And frankly, for the little, the ARM style big little scheme, I don't think you want more than 2 big cores because those things lit up are what are going to really have a high peak power, right?
Right.
And so they only have 2 of the big A72s. And then, I don't know. It seems gimmicky and weird that they have the 2 gigahertz quad cluster of A53s and then a 1.4 gigahertz quad cluster. But I don't know if it's all that consequential. This is a little bit unique to the ARM world. The Apples and Qualcomms of the world just build dual core or quad core setups and don't do big little unless they're implementing ARM's cores, like ARM's own cores. But I don't know. It's not the worst thing. It does, though. There has been kind of a debate online that's kind of been triggered by some of this, why so many cores in a phone? And part of the answer is just the world is insane.
Yeah.
What are we doing? I don't know. and part of it is just that, these guys are super aggressive and those cores are teeny and it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. So, I don't know. They can do things with different types of tuning of process in different areas to use less power with the low power cluster than the high power cluster. But different transistor types and stuff. But it's hard to imagine that really always works out better, especially because you got to modify the Android kernel to do it. Apparently, your dog agrees with me, Jeff. Or maybe he totally disagrees. He's like, oh, damn it, 10 cores is the optimal thing. They don't understand asymmetric multiprocessing. I don't really speak dog, so I'm not sure which it is.
Somebody just set off a firecracker outside. So.
Oh, well, he should go take care of that then. Yeah. So can he get out? He can get out. Okay, you don't have to go help him.
No.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. Anyway, okay, let's go to Jeff if you're able. Let's go to your big review because I want to talk about this. The Asus Transformer Book T300 Qi. Is it Qi? It's not Chai, which is T. It's Qi. Convertible. So we've been looking forward to this one for a while. Tell me about what is this thing?
Well, it's if you're familiar with Asus's Transformer family, it's a convertible 2-in-1, so it can act as a tablet or a notebook. And two completely separate parts. So it is basically a 12.5-inch Windows tablet, and it comes with a separate keyboard that sort of docks into the bottom and turns it into this kind of notebook-style clamshell. The interesting thing about this one, we've seen a bunch of Transformers come out with sort of Atom-class processors and some based on Android. But this is a really, really thin one based on Intel's Core M processor, which is a super low-power Broadwell chip with a 4.5-watt thermal envelope. So it's about sort of double the power envelope of an Atom, but you get these full-fat Broadwell cores, you get the same integrated graphics that you get in sort of an Ultrabook class processor. Everything is just squeezed into this smaller power envelope. And they've managed to put this into a tablet that's thinner than an iPad Air. Not sort of the latest and greatest one, but it's an incredibly thin tablet that's larger because it's a 12.5-inch tablet. But you get a really nice IPS display. The base model comes with a 1080p unit. The one we tested has a 2560 by 1440, which is WQXGA something. And it's basically it's similar actually to the UX305, that sort of Core M Ultrabook that Asus came out with, except here it's in this kind of convertible tablet form. And it's an interesting system. It's one of the most intriguing parts about it is that the starting price is actually fairly low. I think it's $699 for the base configuration, which comes with the 1080p screen. And the one we tested is $899, and that's kind of the optioned up one with a faster processor. The one we tested has 8 gigs of RAM and a dual channel config, whereas the entry level model, one of the knocks against that is actually only single channel RAM. It's 4 gigs. But you got 128 gig SSD. You've got a micro SD slot integrated into it. You've got one of these mini USB 3 ports, Bluetooth, AC, Wi-Fi. It's sort of a complete, almost Ultrabook in a tablet, and then you've got this keyboard on top of that as well.
Or underneath, as you might.
Yeah.
Might be. And so,
Yeah.
what does the thing cost?
It starts at $699 for the base model, which has the single channel memory, 4 gigs of RAM, 128 gig SSD.
Oh, you said the price, didn't you? I'm sorry.
So.
Okay, and then the higher end one is it's more okay.
The higher ones, I think the higher one is also only available through Asus's website right now.
Okay.
And I think that would probably be the one to get. I'm a little bit worried about the single channel memory in the base model. We've seen on previous systems, actually previous Asus systems, how that can really tank performance, especially with the integrated graphics. And this system is actually fairly competent at sort of playing kind of older and indie games, and certainly in sort of day-to-day tasks, the performance is excellent. So you're probably not going to notice too much of a hit, I don't think, from the single channel memory configuration if you're just kind of browsing the web or doing office type stuff. But if you're actually looking to take advantage of what the processor can do and the fact that you can actually enjoy a Steam library with a device like this, I think the higher end one is the better option.
And yeah, it's a shame you didn't get to play with both of them, I guess. But so let's talk about the keyboard dock is a little different than the other Transformers that Asus has had in the past, right? Actually quite different.
It's sort of the same and different. What they did is the docking system is similar. You sort of slide it onto 2 little tabs, but instead of having a mechanical latch, they've replaced that connection with neodymium. I'm not even
Neodymium.
With magnets.
Yeah, rare earth.
Really nicely,
rare earth is how you pronounce that. Say rare earth, and then
so it's this really cool magnetic latching system that you can actually, with a little practice, you can separate the two with only one hand, and that's good. But the problem is that there isn't actually an electrical connection between the tablet and the keyboard like you have on some of the previous Transformers. So that does a couple of things. One,
but how do they talk?
Well, yeah, that's the biggest problem. Is that it's basically a Bluetooth keyboard that makes you pick it up and you assume, oh, well, this is just going to act like a notebook because it looks like a notebook, it feels like a notebook, it's fairly sturdy, and then you have to, you hit the space bar to log in, and you have to wait for a second for the keyboard to wake up, and then establish a Bluetooth connection with the tablet. And then if the tablet isn't already awake, it can't actually wake it up because there's no wake up on Bluetooth. That's just not a thing. So it's kind of this weird situation where physically the two are actually integrated quite well together. The magnet works nicely. It's sort of enough force that you're not worried about it popping off, but not so much force that you can't detach it easily. But it feels like this separate accessory in ways that it hasn't been the case with previous Transformers. So it feels like less of a notebook than previous iterations.
But it does have a touchpad.
It's annoying.
It does have a touchpad.
But it does.
So it's not like just an iPad with the keyboard where you don't have the touch pad.
No, and
all that.
The shame is the touchpad is actually a decent size for a system this size. The keyboard is really good. The keys feel excellent. It's actually quite large. The keyboard, it's almost full size. So I actually love using the keyboard when it's on and all connected. It's just the fact that it has this Bluetooth connection is kind of weird, and it kind of disrupts the flow of using the device. And the keyboard also has a separate battery that you have to charge separately. Battery life is quite good. You're looking at kind of weeks of battery life for the keyboard, but just having a separate battery to worry about there, and knowing that previous Transformers have had this really well integrated dock where they've even had kind of an auxiliary battery and extra USB ports and things, that it seems like ASUS kind of decided they wanted to do a magnetic hinge and do something fancy on that front, and they've lost some functionality and usability as a result. And if you're primarily going to use this thing as a tablet and not be using the keyboard that much, it's not a big deal. But if you really want to take advantage of sort of the hybrid convertible 2-in-1 aspect, it is something that it annoys me constantly, because it's one of those things that every time it goes to sleep and I try to wake it up with a keyboard, I'm reminded that it's Bluetooth, and it's 1 or 2 second delay for me to contemplate the fact that ASUS made maybe not the best decision on this particular feature.
All right, so here's let's just do this. Here it is. The UX305 is a $700 Ultrabook from ASUS that has similar Broadwell hardware in it. It's a little faster, I think. It's got the dual channel config, good SSD, everything you want. And there's no touchscreen and no detachability. So what we're talking about here is, with this device, you get a tablet. In the UX305, you do not. You've got a laptop. And it's functional as a laptop or a tablet, right? We got dueling stuff here. We'll hold. But
do this.
There it is.
It actually takes a little bit of force to pull them apart.
Oh, dude, if I did that would be really bad. I don't think I better do that with this one. So you can break that apart. Here's the question: is what do you win by having that tablet there with the convertibility? Because we've been through different stages on this podcast. I used to think you would only have one computer, and that would be the one. Like, then it would be your laptop or your tablet, and it would detach and reattach, and that would be what you want. And clearly, the market hasn't gone that way. People have phablets and tablets, 8-inch tablets and laptops, but they don't really, like, convertibles haven't been a huge category. But how is this thing to use as a big old 12 or 13, was it 12-inch tablet?
12.5-inch. It's awesome, honestly. I mean, you sort of run into the situation where, like every other Windows tablet, the selection of apps is not nearly as good as you get on iOS and Android. And it kind of balances out with the fact that the selection of standard Windows desktop apps is, dwarfs what you can get on Android and iOS. So it's kind of a balance there. But I actually really like using this as a jumbo tablet. For browsing the web, Internet Explorer is, it's fast. There's some awkward UI stuff that it's sort of made worse by the fact that you're browsing on a large display, but it's a good display, and having that much area for web browsing is fantastic. And also for, viewing photos or just general content consumption, the jumbo tablet, you don't want to call it a form factor or an approach or whatever. I really like that. I appreciate having smaller tablets. They're great for portability, but if you're just doing something for primarily, sort of couch surfing, you're not going to be traveling around with it a lot. You're not going to be sort of carrying it or sort of holding it in one hand. This is kind of heavy for a tablet. I mean, it is larger, but it's about double the weight of an iPad Air, which isn't as sort of cumbersome as you might expect because the tablet is slightly larger. It's easy, if I'm sitting on the couch, I can kind of prop it up on my chest, and it doesn't really feel that heavy, but it's not something you're going to be holding outstretched with one hand like you can with some of the smaller, like 7 and 8 inch tablets.
I was going to say, what do you bench, dude?
I do kettlebell stuff now, but
oh, is that all?
Yeah,
okay.
I lift, bro.
You lift, but see, I mean, I'm not sure like how accurate. If you're like, oh, it's not too heavy, and like the normal person, like the computer geek arms, like me, little T-Rex arms, I'm gonna be like, it's gonna be crushing my chest, and like.
Well, but that's the thing is because it's big, it kind of balances it out. Like it's not something that would be comfortable to just kind of like hold suspended in midair because it's just kind of giant. So I mean, it's not the lightest thing in the world. It's one of the trade-offs that you get. So I quite like it as a large tablet. It's fantastic for photo sort of gallery viewing. That's one of the things that's actually I noticed about the performance is quite responsive, especially when you're zooming in on really high megapixel images or flipping through a lot of them at once. That's an easy way to bog down a tablet, especially if you're doing. I mean, I'm only using 18 megapixel shots on a camera that was bought a long time ago, so I can imagine what some of the higher megapixel shots will do on some of these other tablets. And this is a great experience for the apps that work well on it. So it's kind of one of those things where it's not as good as a dedicated tablet at tablet stuff, and it's not as good as a dedicated notebook at notebook stuff. But if you only want one device, it can do both credibly. I wish it was a little bit more comfortable as a notebook, and I wish there were more apps that took advantage of what it can do as a tablet. So as a compromise between the two, it's kind of not ideal, but it's getting closer and closer, and I'm glad to see the Transformer sort of move up to this class of hardware on the processor front, because they actually do make an Atom-based version of it that starts at $400, I think, and that's probably, depending on what you're doing, that might be the more appealing option, especially since it has a 1900 by 1200 display on the base model, so it's a 16 by 10 instead of a 16 by 9 aspect ratio. And that may work a little bit better in terms of, like the weight. It's a 10-inch tablet. It's smaller. It's considerably lighter. It should have better battery life. The battery life on this one is, kind of 5 to 6 hours, which is not great. Certainly not if you're looking for sort of a workhorse for doing work while you're traveling or something. It's not ideal for that. But it does kind of do a lot of things in one system. So if you're looking for sort of one device to rule them all, this will be kind of one device that will not quite rule everything, but at least allow you to carry one machine.
Yeah. Now, if Apple makes a big, like a 12 or 13-inch iPad, then I guess you would endorse that.
I like the big tablet approach for sure. I think Samsung makes some for Android, but I hope, I've sort of thought for a while that people are just going to end up with computing surfaces of various sizes, everything from, your people who prefer sort of the 4.7 inch or whatever the smaller iPhone size is. You got your phablets, you got your 7-inch tablets, you got your 10 inches. And I think there's definitely room, especially using this for sort of 12 and 13 inch. I think if you were using a lower power SoC that you didn't maybe have to put as much battery in, you could do something like this in a lighter form factor that would be maybe more comparable to 10-inch tablets from a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So I think the jumbo, I like the jumbo idea. I especially like having it in sort of a convertible form factor because I think this is a good screen size for a notebook as well. And it's just one of those things where, a little bit more refinement and this would be really amazing. It's not quite there yet, and some of it's the technology, and then some of it's kind of the decisions about making the keyboard a Bluetooth thing rather than something that was, more tightly integrated.
Yeah. Yeah, and so here's the thing that it's taken some time to sink in for me, that I guess we can do this comparison. Maybe it makes sense. So this is a 2560 by 1440 display, IPS It looks like it's by all measures quite a good display.
Yeah, it's excellent.
And good color gamut, offering of viewing. It looks like it probably is pre-calibrated from the out of the box to be reasonably good, right?
Yep.
And so it's doing a good job of hitting the right color temperature. 6500K, like D65 white point is just right there. Reasonably high contrast. Here's the thing: you said the battery life is what?
Like 5 to 6 hours.
Right, and I have as I mentioned, I have the UX305. It is a similar super thinnest laptop you can buy, and it's like 10 hours. And I think the main reason it is because it's a 1080p display instead of the higher resolution, and so you don't have to get the same brightness through larger pixels. You don't have to push as much light through those smaller pixels. You get that density up there, they're blocking light, and it becomes a power efficiency issue. I think the thing that makes the new MacBook impressive is that they got to even higher resolution than this, and they're doing 10 hours or more of battery life on it. They actually rearranged the subpixel structure to make that happen.
Well, they're also doing crazy stuff with batteries and layering things, and I think some of that's the battery tech too, and packing more into the chassis.
But if you've looked at the new MacBook, it's actually more compact than either of these systems in reality, because it's not nearly as wide or deep as them. So the packaging is impressive, but I think the display tech is what allows them to get. It's both, but what allows them to get that long battery life in combination with the super high resolution is just like next gen stuff that is not yet in these things. And these things are great, but you're going to pay a tax power wise for that resolution. And for Apple, you pay literally just more money, but then you get
a lot, yeah.
Right. Then you get the new stuff. So it is that comparison is interesting, because when you do ask the question what am I paying for when I get this more expensive MacBook, some of the answer is that they're funding their R&D, they're paying off their R&D by charging this premium, and the people who go buy them, bless them, I don't have that extra money, but they're funding some pretty nice stuff. Anyway,
the industry will then slowly adopt.
Yeah, well, hopefully, and I mean, let's just face it. I love this UX305. It is just a MacBook Air clone down to its very last transistor, right? And I mean, it's the same layout and everything. You put it next to an Air for cloning reasons, but it's great, and so I'll take it. And I wound up buying that. That's what I bought for myself. So there you have it. So performance-wise, we got a lot of numbers here. I don't want to spend a lot of time on them. People can read the review if they want to see this. And it is interesting. We've got some comparisons to what I guess first mobile devices, and then to other x86 PCs running Windows, right?
Yeah, we've got kind of a range. So we actually compared. We've got some scores for your ZenBook as well. We've got some from a Broadwell-based NUC, which is kind of our stand-in for an Ultrabook class, kind of like a 15-watt version of the chip that's in the Qi. And then we've got, in a couple of tests, we've got some desktop stuff, and then some sort of smaller tablets and smartphones, just kind of for extra flavor. Yeah. But the performance, I mean, it's good. It feels a lot like the CULV Pentium in my old Ultra Portable, which was kind of the same type of chip, kind of between an Atom and a full fat, mobile processor. In this case, it's kind of between sort of a quad core Atom and what you would get with sort of a dual core Ultrabook chip. And if you're just doing, normal work, I was doing a lot of Photoshop with this. Web browsing, office type stuff, productivity tasks. It's fast, it's responsive, it's got an SSD, stuff loads quickly. If you're going to be doing rendering and video encoding and things like that, obviously it's not going to be faster than a chip that has a higher thermal envelope. But it still even actually remains reasonably responsive during heavy multitasking. There was a period of time where I just sort of fired up an encoding job, video encoding job that hit all the cores, and then was doing some, some writing and flipping back to a web browser, and then I launched Photoshop. And I mean, it's not as fast as my desktop at doing those things, but it doesn't really feel slow doing it either. It's actually a really good sort of computing experience from a performance standpoint, and it kind of sold me on the Core M as the next portable system I buy. If it's kind of this class of Windows device, is absolutely going to have a Core M in it. I think Intel really nailed the balance between kind of pricing and sort of power and then performance with a chip.
Yeah, my impressions from the UX305 are, well, first of all, like every time I use like a quad core like Atom processor like a Bay Trail, my impression there is like, oh, hey, this is not bad at all. This is pretty good. It's not painful like the old Atom. But the impression using a Broadwell is, or at least the UX305 is, wow, like this is as fast as I want. Like it's really responsive, and I'm not waiting for much of anything. And if I am, it's usually not even the CPU; it's some other thing. And the SSD is so fast that I'm barely even waiting for it much. And geez, I mean, Intel is in a good place with this chip and products based on it. And this is, I think, like the UX305, it's completely passively cooled, right?
Yep, completely silent. It doesn't even really get that warm. And if you're playing games or something, it'll get warm, and if you're charging it, it gets quite warm. But all the heat is sort of localized to one side, and if you're just kind of surfing the web or doing work, it doesn't get that hot. And if you're using it as a notebook, the part that gets hot is never going to be touching you anyway either, because it's just kind of on the back of the screen. So it's really well behaved from that standpoint, and it doesn't really. I mean, it's obviously thermally limited in some of these scenarios, and we saw with some of our benchmarks, especially the ones that really pin the system, where it'll be faster in the first run and then slower in each consecutive run as sort of the chip heats up, and it can't range as high with its turbo clock speed. But in day-to-day use, where you're doing mostly kind of bursty stuff, where you'll have a flurry of activity and then nothing for a bit. It's perfect for that. I spent some time just kind of watching Intel's Turbo utility, which will tell you what the clock speed is doing while you're using the machine. And in sort of day-to-day use, like it turbos up to 2.5 or to 2.9, which is the peak clock speed for the chip that we have in this particular unit. And then it's right down to its base clock speed or lower. So it doesn't actually spend that much time at full utilization. So the day-to-day user experience is actually much better than some of the benchmarks suggest if you're looking at kind of rendering speeds or encoding speeds or benchmarks that might heat up the system with a more prolonged workload that you're not necessarily going to get in the real world.
Yep. Yeah. And it's just a good experience overall, I think, and I'm pleased with it. Or with, like I said, with my Broadwell-based system. So I do think PC laptops have kind of been on a downturn lately for a lot of good reasons for a number of years, and I think this year is a good year for them to make a comeback because there are a lot of good systems out there. Dell's XPS 13 is nice. This there are too many to mention really, but this being one of them. Because it's really an interesting system. So you in the article you did some stuff. You've already kind of mentioned this. Playing casual games is good. Video playback is generally good. We talked a little bit about battery life. It looks like that you had web browsing. You had we got 2 scores here.
Yeah, it actually scores a little bit better if you're using the Metro version of Internet Explorer versus the desktop version. I don't know if that's because those apps are compartmentalized and it's not keeping track of some of the stuff that it's doing when you're running a desktop app, but it was actually
a little
about
over
an
an
hour's
hour
difference.
Yeah.
And I sort of ran the same test again on the Transformer T100, which is based on a Bay Trail chip, and it was basically no difference on that. So
and it's 6.3 hours web surfing or 5 hours, basically 4.9 hours web surfing, depending on the browser, and then about 5 hours with video playback too. So not maybe as much as you really want for sure, but actually not too bad given everything.
It kind of almost fits with the tablets. It's not the most portable system if you want to, something for long trips or traveling. But if you're looking for something for just kind of couch surfing, which the larger tablet kind of lends itself to more than portability, then the shorter battery life isn't as big of a deal. I mean, the tablet that I've got in the living room is plugged in half of the time. So,
Right. Okay, well, let's see. We spent a bunch of time on this, but let's wrap this up real quick. You like it. It's a good machine. Is this what you would get for yourself? Because, okay, you're in the same boat as me. I had 5 years. I had the CULV laptop. And then I went and I pulled the trigger on the UX305. I went Broadwell. And I'm totally happy that I did. Like, it's been great. So, is this your next laptop?
You know, if it didn't have the Bluetooth issue, I may have ordered one already. It bugs me. It's totally a usability thing, and I would use a device like this quite a lot in notebook mode, so that bothers me. And it's enough to give me pause right now. That's the thing, is that part of me also really wants a stylus. I haven't tried the stylus on this. It does actually have an optional, I think it's a $50 add-on. It's a Synaptics powered stylus. It's supposed to have all kinds of pressure sensitivity. So I'd probably want to try that before sinking my money into anything. But I'm kind of in this weird position where I really like everything about this except for the keyboard interaction, which I find really annoying. And I look at all the other alternatives, and it's, you got the Surface, whose keyboard integration issues are maybe more annoying because it's kind of one of those, relies on a kickstand, doesn't quite work on your lap situations.
Mm-hmm.
Or you got Lenovo's ThinkPad, which is kind of, almost double the price, and you don't even get the same resolution for the screen. So this is positioned really well and priced really well. It just kind of has this one, I wouldn't call it a fatal flaw, but if you specifically want a convertible tablet that works in both modes and is a really good notebook, I think it really does damage to the appeal. So I don't think I'm going to end up buying this, but it's on my radar, and I really like almost everything else about it. So
okay, yeah, I just gave up on the whole Windows tablet thing, which part of that is like I cannot use Windows 8 Touch. Like, I will just go screaming back to, I don't care whether it's Android or iOS. Like, I'm happy with both of them. I love lots of things about both of those. But Windows 8 Touch is like a completely weird alien environment where you have to do these terrible gestures and stuff doesn't work right, and then I hate it. So I want it to be good. I hope for it to be good. I wish that Microsoft had made different choices, because there is kind of a language now, that the UI design kind of language for touch that is out there, and they tried to build something different from that, and it's only like semi-successful. Everybody likes Live Tiles, and they've stolen that, but the rest of it is kind of a mess. So I don't know. Okay, well, you guys, we have a few questions from the chat, so let's take those, and then we may have to pull the plug before I talk about HBM. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's getting late. Jeff's like, dude, yeah, we got to end this.
Well, I mean, no. It's an interesting topic. It'd just take an hour to discuss.
It could, and that would be bad. So okay. First of all, we have a question from Milo about what he should do with this monitor when Q4 this year comes around. He's got a specific budget in Q4, and he's asking us to predict what he should buy now based on what's going to happen then. And the answer is, like, ask me then when it's time for you to buy. so I'm sorry, Milo. Like I appreciate.
Well,
that
it's especially a tough position for monitors too, because we're kind of like in the midst of a transition. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, I don't know. The only thing I'll say is, I had this Acer, what is this, XB270HU IPS G-Sync 144 hertz, insane, awesome thing here, and you should buy that unless there's something better out then. So I don't know. It's not, the prices are coming down, I think, on these things. So okay, here's another one. iReacts says, hey guys, is there ever a situation where a GTX 970 is better than a GTX 980? So that's a GeForce card, GeForce GTX 970 and 980. I think the answer is when you have to pay for it. Then the 970 is a lot less money. And they're not that different otherwise. There are these issues with the 970 has a different memory config, and effectively its true memory capacity is not really the same as just straight 4 gigs of capacity. But man, I think that what the 970 is like $336 base, and the 980 is $550 base.
Right.
Just buy a slightly higher clock 970, maybe overclock it a little bit, and don't even bother with the 980. They're based on the same chip. The 970 is slightly disabled in a few portions, but it's the same basic technology, same silicon.
Because Scott, you overclocked a 970, right? Like, you really turned up the clocks on one, and it performed better than a reference 980, right?
I think so, and there's not a ton of room in the 980s for overclocking. It's the same chip, and the same chip kind of can be taken, similar places. There are some units disabled still on the 970, but yeah, it just kind of is the case that you get a 970, you get that GM 204 goodness. It's really close to what the 980 is. Yeah. So I don't know. I was looking through, in response to this question, I was looking through some synthetic tests. There are cases where, like in some very narrow place, maybe some NVIDIA lower end GPUs are like in some weirdly measurable way better than the higher end ones. I couldn't find that for the 970 versus the 980. But even if it was measurable, it's clear the 980 out of the box is the faster product. I don't think there's anything about the 970 that makes it better, except just that it's a way better value, and there's not that big of a difference between the two. So, yeah. Here's another one. Ra7 Ghoul. I don't know how to say that, dude. He says, A4 size has worked for centuries. Why is that suddenly way too big? I have no idea what he's talking about. A4 is
paper
size?
What is A4? Is that 11 by 17?
No, it's like closer to R8.5 by 11, but it's narrower and taller. It's sort of the standard size of paper in Europe.
Oh, so it's 8.27 by 11.
Yeah, I think that he's probably talking about laptops or something.
Tablet screens.
Yeah. I can say, like, I don't. I'm one of those guys who actually doesn't prefer the 4:3 of the Apple. I do like the 3:2 of the Surface tablets. So I do actually prefer sort of a longer, skinnier versus a more square aspect ratio. But I'm with him on sort of larger sizes. I wonder what does the diagonal work out for that?
He says it is about tablets. I think it just depends on a lot of things. I like an 8-inch tablet because it's about the size of a book, and it works for reading, and that's what I do a lot of on a tablet. And actually, if I'm going to do more like serious media consumption, it's going to be on a much bigger screen or like a desktop screen for the most part. But I don't know. I don't have any. I'm curious to see what devices may come out with larger tablet screen sizes and whether they might be hits. Maybe they would. And it maybe a rumor is Apple's going to do it. If they do it,
I would expect it, yeah.
I mean, if they can't make it go, nobody will. But if anybody can, they probably will. So we'll see what happens. Maybe it'll come out and I'll get one look at it and be like, okay, I get it now. I suspect that Apple will do the thing that you'd want in this size of device, which to me is make it super light. Make it as thin as you can and make it super light so that the form factor itself is not, like, the downsides of it are muted, right, by the fact that you've just made it as small as you could physically while giving you as much screen space as possible. And there's no reason why they can't do that. I mean, you look at the iPad Air 2, give it a bigger screen, put more battery in that area where the screen is. I think you're good to go. So it may happen. Alpha Cheese says, what is the best graphics card right now for $200? Either the GTX 960, GeForce GTX 960, or the Radeon R9 285. When I reviewed the GTX 960, I basically decided that was probably the one, but it was really close. But the price keeps changing on these things. So let me look at my GTX 960 review, guys, and see how did the performance things scale or shake out there. Overall performance.
Did you just skip to the conclusion?
Yeah, I did, because I wanted to find the little graph. So here's what happened, and this is the thing that just really hurts AMD right now. If you look at the FPS averages, in fact, let me bring this into the window that we are using for the show. If you look at the FPS averages, and this is kind of a measure of GPU oomph, right? When you look at an FPS average. The FPS average for this, the Radeon R9 285 beats the GTX 960 across a suite of games in average FPS performance. The R9 285 has a little bit beefier hardware, so that win is an honest one. It makes sense. However, when you switch to our frame time sensitive 99th percentile metric, then you find higher performance from the GTX 960 than from the R9 285. And actually the difference between the two, the gap between the two, is a little bit larger in favor of the GeForce when you switch to that metric. Now, this is a specific suite of games, so it could be different for other games, but the trouble right now that AMD seems to have is that NVIDIA is doing a really good job of optimizing its graphics drivers and its products for a smooth gaming experience. And they're able to achieve, with actually lower spec hardware, a better experience because that's what they're doing. The Radeon guys simply haven't been doing as good a job in the ways that we quantify this. And I think they're good. I think they're good ways to quantify these things. And actually, if you look at the reviews, and I will have, in some games, there are cases where clearly the Radeon's, it's a little bit of a bumpy road compared to the GeForce. There's not a terrible experience in I don't think, too many cases. But, I think that these numbers are in earnest. And, of course, this will change with different driver releases. But as we mentioned, I think, earlier on the podcast, there haven't been a ton of driver releases from AMD. So, right now, I think I'd pick the GTX 960 over the Radeon R9 285 on the basis of our data, which reflects a better user experience with the GeForce. It's entirely possible that with the exact same hardware, the situation could and maybe even should be reversed, because you're getting slightly beefier graphics hardware with the Radeon. But it's not translating into a better user experience. So that's my answer. What else do we have, guys? I think is that it for our Twitch questions? I think it is.
There was a question earlier about whether or not I have a wheel for Project Cars, and yes, I do.
Yeah, you need to do a little post about your setup when you get the whole thing. Have you done that before?
No, I've had the wheel for a while and haven't really written about it. That's the thing, I don't really have a whole lot of experience with good wheels. This is kind of a big upgrade over the old Xbox 360 wheel that I've had, and kind of the old PlayStation wheel that a buddy of mine has that I've used a bunch. But I have zero frame of reference to how it compares to other good stuff, other than it feels good and it seems to be well built, and it's really good for driving games.
There you go. All right, we have to do that then. Anyway, well, listen. I think that probably should be wrap it up for the show tonight, guys. Before we go, let's see. Can we talk about what we're working on? I've got working on multiple things. I can't tell you what I'm working on. Jeff Kampman, what are you working on?
I was working on the Define S, Fractal Designs Define S. Last time we talked, then I got sick and it got delayed again. So I'm hoping to finish up that review this week sometime.
Excellent. Jeff Gazier, what do you got in the hopper, man? Can you talk about it?
Yes, I've got Core i7 powered Broadwell NUC, which has got the I guess the Iris Pro graphics. I'm not sure exactly which variant, but basically a more pimped out version of the Broadwell NUC that we reviewed earlier. And I've also got some numbers for the Samsung SM951, which is their M.2 SSD with the by4 Gen 3 interface. So it's a wicked fast AHCI PCI Express SSD. And I've also got the NVMe version as well, although there's some complications with testing that in secure racing. So I'm not sure exactly when I'm going to have good numbers out of that drive. But Yeah, that's what I'm working on.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks,
And
guys.
just one more thing. One more thing, real quick. We
oh.
can answer real fast. But
Okay.
someone asks, "Will The Witcher 3 be included in the GPU test suite?"
I guess it depends. If you're talking about Jeff's test suite, that's up to
No,
him.
well, yours, but
I
assume that's
I
what you're
can't neither confirm nor deny any GPU testing happening in Damage
Yes.
Labs.
Yes,
But
yes.
I can confirm the installation of The Witcher 3 on some test systems that happened like yesterday, and it was really fast because I downloaded it over my new cable modem, and then I uploaded it or I copied it over from the SSDs on the new Damage box. So The Witcher, there's The Witcher's moving, like bits of The Witcher being slung around my lab at this time for reasons that cannot be confirmed or denied.
I can confirm that The Witcher 3 will probably not run on the Broadwell i7 now.
Oh,
It might, but it's probably not going to be a good experience.
probably not. That game is, I think, pretty hardcore. So, all right. All right. Well, thanks,
All right.
guys. Thanks for the show. Everybody in the chat channel, thank you for joining us. And if you're tuning in online or in the podcast, thanks for joining us. We will be back next time, hopefully with Jordan. And I think we'd try and do this next week, guys. So it should be good. All right. Take care.
Cool. Yep.